I hope you guys have found your Crown images on Carmen. You can find them in the reference images folder. Um, there's like 8 or so to choose from. So your first step, if you haven't started already, is just going to be to start modeling um, what we just saw here, and like draw that and start creating a three-dimensional interpretation of that. And like so kind of the really exciting part of this is like exactly the thing that's frustrating in Rhino when you're modeling something is that sometimes you're like object snapping to something that's like in the background, and like basically this like interpretation of depth. That's what's really ambiguous here. What we're going to do right now is try to get you to this point so that way you can start getting those renders going. So to start you guys pretty much from zero, hopefully you guys have modeled your work already, or you're starting to. But you just want to jump over to Illustrator, and you're looking to create something like this. And one thing to like kind of watch out for is depending on how you make this, you might find that you have like a little white line at the top edge of your Illustrator artboard, which this is a 5 by 5 inch artboard that you'll be making. But you really want to avoid getting any white line remaining over the edge there. So one way to do that that's definitely going to succeed is that like when you're generating this thing, you're going to export um, this thing as a JPEG. So it's kind of like however however Illustrator sees this, they're going to see the illustrator is going to see the outline of the artboard and like just what's within inside of that. So um, it's better to have like to have drawn a rectangle that just like hangs on the outside a little bit, and then you don't have to worry about it. More so than like having it ever so slightly off, because you might end up with a white line when you start rendering this stuff, and you'll see the repeat of the pattern. So I would definitely advise just take this background image that you're using, and if you guys remember from my last video, there's that thing called the bounding box in Illustrator. So hide bounding box and turn the bounding box on. You want to make sure that under view it would be shown right now. It's asking if we want to hide it, but you can also hit Control Shift B, and that'll let you adjust that. But so if you don't have your bounding box on, you can't do anything other than just move the entire shape. Whereas if you do have the bounding box on, you can resize the entire shape. So I would just recommend pulling that to the outside just really slightly like that, and then a little bit more confidence. To really start in the beginning, you just want to go to make a new document and then do a custom artboard with a 5 inch by 5 inch size. So once you have your 5 inch by 5 inch artboard, you'll want to find this little guy over here that says Swatches. And down here on the bottom left, you'll see Swatch Libraries menu. And you'll go to the bottom to Other Library. And then you'll just need to have downloaded the folder or the file that is called the Knowlton Rep 2020 ASE file. And you'll just click that, and it's going to open up this other window that is all of our kind of color schemes that we're going to leave available. And you're just going to stick to 2 colors within one of these palettes. So now all you have to do is just go into the swatches, and I have some already set up here, but so you're just going to click swatches here, and then click this kind of like stack of books shape button, and then you'll go to patterns, basic graphics, and then you can pick from one of these 3. I like the textures one a lot, but they all have pretty good options. I think some of these are really interesting too. And then so all you're going to do is you're actually just going to drag and drop this straight onto the artboard. And so um, once you drag and drop one of your swatches onto here, you'll see that like there's this outside, that's the bounding box. Um, and if you hit Control Shift B, it'll disappear. So you should make sure that your bounding box is turned on so you can see that. And then we're actually just going to scale this whole thing. And the goal is to get this little rectangle or this little square here to fill up the entire artboard. So I'm just holding Shift and I'm scaling this thing. And it is really tedious. So just do your best and take your time and try to get this lined up. But, it's not going to, I don't know if there's a way to like lock it to that point while you scale it, but that would be really convenient. So yeah, you're just going to go back and forth and just try to get that just right. And then when you do feel like that's in a good spot, you can either open your color palettes if you don't have it out, or you should, if you just have it in a separate little window, then you can just have with this selected, just hit ungroup, and then you should see that there is like that inner square that we were messing with actually does, it is like a real square that's there, and it's unfilled. So just select where that is and then choose the filled option over here, and then pick whatever your color is going to be. So we got that. And then what I like to do is I like to just be organized and make it a little easier. So I'll actually just move that onto a different layer and put that layer at the bottom. And that way I can lock it. And then I'll select all of those. And I will change the fill on those to, now I forget which color palette I was in, but that's why it is better to do something like that and then be able to come over here to your swatches, and then it's all right there. So then you can just pick your color, and basically that's it. So again, this is just about, we're trying to make sure that this thing gets created and is seamless. And so the way to achieve that is to make sure that everything is really aligned on where the edge of the artboard is. So do your best with that. Really take some time to do it, because like anything like that you see is going to mess up that whole process. So I took my time with this one, and so I'm just going to be able to do export. So when you go to export this, the critical step is to make sure you check this box, use artboard. And so that's going to make sure that your artboard defines the area of this JPEG as opposed to letting it bleed off of that page. So just export your JPEG, name it something you can remember, and then jump over to Rhino. And all you need to do is select your object, and then under the Properties tab, you're going to select a kind of paint tube, toothpaste tube looking icon, material. And then you just click in this drop down and then use a new material and then picture. And so grab the texture that you made, and you'll see that it just like, right now we have this in the planar, mapping. So it's literally just starting off the top face and just kind of extruding it through. And so I'm going to show you guys what it's going to look like if you don't use the planar, or if you didn't use the use artboard. Basically what's going to happen is it's going to kind of include the background, so you're going to end up with this like ugly, kind of interesting, but but incorrect for this project. Not very useful texture. Um, so just make sure that you have use artboard selected. And once you have that, once you have this material applied, you can just select all the objects that you want to apply it to, and go in here and find that material. You can also use match and just click onto the one thing you've already applied it to. So I just like selected everything that I wanted to mess with, click on match here in the properties panel, and then click whatever it is. So super useful. And yeah, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it looks like so actually like it doesn't match the mapping style that I used previously. So if you're confused about that, um, just make sure that you're gonna have to like change the mapping, the texture mapping uh, settings um, after you get this. So uh, I'm coming over here to just show you guys the difference between the different type of mappings. Next to the material icon, you're just going to the texture mapping icon, and then you have all of these different um, options to pick from. So basically, you just want to kind of match the shape that you're working with, or the like style that you want, or like the effect you want to create, um, to one of these. So like it's pretty obvious if you're making a box that you would probably use the box mapping, but that's not necessarily true, given that you may prefer to do it a different way. You might be able to like make something more interesting um, by uh, I didn't hit enter. So um, so the way that you can like change things, like when you already have that mapping set up on whatever it is, and you just want to kind of like alter that. So like here I have a cylinder and I'm using planar mapping. Um, so you can just select that object and then go over here and then do show mapping. And now it's just showing me that plane that's creating this entire texture mapping situation. And then you can just kind of rotate it and like do some really fun things with it and end up with a really skewed um, a mapping of the texture. I mean, um, so you're just gonna want to go through here and like try the different types of texture mapping and like just understand like the kind of idea behind using like the spherical mapping, um, which is like really, you know, pretty straightforward. But just make sure that like when you're trying to use something like spherical mapping, you're going to want to have center turned on, and then probably quadrant turned on as well. And you just want to like try to find those points. It's kind of can be kind of annoying sometimes. So yeah, you can see how like that kind of actually rotated it. Another interesting thing to just see is like the texture mapping will stay with the geometry as I rotate the geometry. So and then we can see that there's a line, and that might just simply be how my graphics card is dealing with this. Um, and it's actually giving me that seam, or it could just be that it did a bad job. So that's why I was saying before, you really want to spend some time and just make sure that you've got that texture set up really, really well. So jumping over to your 3D model, what you want to do is just make a few copies of this thing, and you're just going to play around with it. So first version here, and we're going to just make a few other ones, and I'll show you how to kind of apply these things. So basically, what you can do to begin with is you can actually just explode these into their respective surfaces. Um, and you can see like some of these, um, I might want that to, I'll just want these to represent different things possibly. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back over to my materials and, or go into properties and, and select one of my objects here, and I'll just go into materials, and then I will pick one of these render materials, and I can even just like select all of these and then apply the render material to all of them, but then like select the different pieces, and then start to manipulate how that texture mapping works, and that will really change drastically how all of this uh, gets mapped, obviously. So um, I'm just going to go with planar right now, just to like show you what that would look like on this first surface here. Um, and like obviously we have this like sphere, so like the logical thing to do might be to use the spherical mapping, but like maybe we want to kind of make the sphere seem like it isn't a sphere. So um, there's a number of ways that we could try to like break this up. And like another thing is like, can you explode a sphere? Um, sometimes like depending on how it's made, you might be able to get like a left and right side, or a top and a bottom. Um, but um, so we can like apply like a cylindrical mapping or something to this, and we could start from the center and like pull it down and just kind of see what happens. And then we could also like show that mapping cylinder and like try to like maybe go into top view and just like see what that looks like when you pull it over. And so maybe we want to also like rotate it. So this is all just like having that object selected and then just do show mapping and hide mapping, and you can just like turn those back on. Um, I'm interested to see like if I show the mapping on more than one thing, and then I select maybe that one as well, and then I rotate both of them. You want to make sure that ortho isn't on. That's gonna just gonna make things unnecessarily rigid for what we're doing. So what I meant to grab. But so yeah, so the idea is really just to really experiment with this, and like the weirder you can make this, I think the cooler your project is going to be. So um, maybe you'd want to shrink this down and something like that. That's pretty interesting. And then you can just hit escape to like get out of those things, and then um, show the mapping for this other thing. We'll see what's grabbing here. So I'm going to explode that. Possibly you'd want to do do a surface mapping on this. And notice that it gives you the 3-point option, so it's just like when you're drawing a rectangle. Usually you get different ways that you can do it. Um, and so you can go from like really dense to much looser, and then once you've kind of played with that, uh, and you get happy with it, the next things are going to be to try to create shadows, um, and basically set this thing up for V-Ray. And one of the things that I haven't said, but you should be aware of, is just into your current renderer. Um, you should be in Rhino render right now, just because like that's easy to let you like apply the materials and kind of get started. Um, and then what we're going to do next is we're going to start setting up lights. So right here in the standard tab, all the way here to the right, you have this little cone. So that's a spotlight, but you can hit this down arrow, and then there's this directional light. So the directional lights are really useful because they will let you get like really clear shadows and stuff like that. They're not like diffusive how they often are, and you can see that like I'm in rendered view. So like where did that go? You'd think that you'd see it right now, but when you're in the rendered view, it actually hides the lights that you draw unless you like mess with that in your settings. So you want to go into shaded viewport, and then you can rotate that. Um, good. This is a good moment to like rotate it by predictable angles and then like compare them. Um, and then that way you can keep track of what you like. Like this, does the steeper angle or more vertical angle like end up creating a better shadow for you? And then you can also, with that light that you've created selected, you can just change the intensity over here. And like 2 is a good spot, but you can go higher and lower. And then you can also check out this render tools window here, and you can click on this light bulb, and it'll also show you all of the lights that you have drawn. So, and you can like edit the intensity here as well. So there I have that previously drawn one, and here's the new one that I just made, and like you can mess with the color of these. I don't think we'll be covering that right now, but and also like if you want to turn them off, you can just like do that. So if you end up making like 4 lights, right, for all of your different views, you can come into this window and you can turn on and off the ones that you like and don't like. So, and then you can just jump back into the rendered view. And remember that we will be making this rendering will be a top-down view. So you're just going to go into top view, and you just want to, when you draw that directional light, which by the way, again, render tools now, you can also see like everything all at the same time here. But so creating a directional light, it was literally just click the end. You're clicking the end of that point here, and then you're just like clicking kind of the direction of that line. So sometimes I'll actually just draw a line first and then draw the directional light to it, and then that way I can like, if I have like 3 different lines, I can just like have one directional light and I can move it back and forth and stuff like that. So now I'm just going to go into top view, and currently I have top view set up for rendering, and you can see that because I turned off that skylight, it got a lot darker. And then there's also like the sun. I don't have the sun set up for anything right now, but yeah, so we'll need V-Ray to start really making these lights work for us. And we can also change the intensity of those lights too. So like the right now at like 2 and 6, we're at like a really low level of light, and it's kind of odd because our background is white. But yeah, that's easily changed. But V-Ray kind of works like a camera. So when you go into V-Ray, it'll essentially be like all of the things about like exposure and like the F value and things. So if any of you guys know about photography already, you'll actually be a little bit ahead of the curve right now. But so you can just crank this, like basically the Rhino renderer is like a more simplified version. And in V-Ray, we'll be able to like crisp in these shadows and like make these things appear in like a really dramatic and like clean way, as opposed to this kind of like diffuse kind of like gradient away from the edge of the shadow. So just start thinking about how you want to compose these, and really play around with how you want these patterns to how the render materials are going to pattern your objects or your model. But yeah, more to come in a separate video about how to use V-Ray.